We're going to move on to part 5. People have a lot of questions regarding part 5. So first, has there been any changes to part 5? Yes, there have been some changes made, and one major change is that you're given longer preparation time, 45 seconds. But before that, while listening to the situation, you can take notes, right? So now you don't have to struggle trying to remember everything that you're hearing or listening to, but you can take notes. So this is a big change for this part, because a lot of students were saying, oh gosh, when I get to the end of the message, I forget what I heard. Always forget what I heard before. So it's really hard to remember everything that was in that message. So God, please, Gwen, help me. What should I do? So yeah, 2 major changes. 1, you can take notes while you're listening, and 2, you have longer preparation time. Now, question number 2, do I have to remember the name of the person who left the message? No, you don't have to. You never ever have to remember the name of the person who left the message, and you don't have to remember the person's phone number. When it gets to the end of the telephone message, they say, oh, please call me back at 456-7792. And I see some students who are writing down that number, which is totally nonsense. You don't have to do that. Okay, so you don't have to remember the name of the person who left the message. Question number 3, how many solutions do I have to provide? All right, so the whole title of this part 5, propose a solution. The title indicates propose a solution. In English, a means 1, so as long as you provide 1 solution, it's fine. But I, decided to go with 2 solutions, so I'm just adding 1 more. But if you feel like adding 3, 4, 5, do it. It's fine. But the thing is, it's not only about providing a or many solutions, all right? When you look at the direction page, they say first, show that you recognize a problem, which means they want you to provide some evidence that you understood the message and the situation. So you have to sort of summarize what you heard and then propose a solution to deal with the problem. So it's not only about proposing a solution or proposing as many solutions as possible, all right? So you have to summarize in the beginning of your message, I heard this, this, and that. And then later, regarding the problem, you say, do this, do that, and propose or several solutions. That's why, I start providing 2 solutions, because 1 seems a little too short, and 2 is okay. But when you start talking more and try to provide 3 or 4 or 5, 6 solutions, you won't have enough time. You won't have enough time. So oftentimes I mention the template that we use with my students in my class. The template that we use is good for 1-minute answer. If you use this template, you can talk for about 20 seconds regarding the summary of the message, what you heard, and you can provide decent amount, 2 solutions. You can talk decently about the 2 solutions that you would like to provide. So when you look at the template, 1-minute template, you can summarize and provide 2 solutions. So how many solutions? I would say 2. I always tell my students, 1 is not enough, go for 2. Okay, question number 4, how can I use the note-taking skills for this part? Now, when you're taking notes, you shouldn't be greedy. I see some students who are being very greedy, and when they're listening to the message, they're trying to write down all the words they hear, which is impossible. And while you're writing nowadays, some people have trouble knowing the right spelling of the word, so they're stuck with writing the word. Or some people, they're not fast enough, or they don't listen carefully, or they can't listen carefully enough, that they're missing some words. So it's not dictating what you heard. It's not dictating what you're hearing. It's about taking notes of the important words that you hear, that you want to remember. So don't try to write down the whole full sentence. Try to only write down some important key words. And while you're writing the key words, there are some long words. And for those long words, don't try to finish up writing that word, okay? Just sort of like write some alphabets that would help you remember what the word was. I would say that. That's the skill. That's the note-taking skill that you need for this part. Okay, don't write the full sentence for long words, like when they say recommendation and you want to write the word recommendation. You know how many words are there, alphabets are there in the word recommendations? When you're trying to write everything down, they're going to be already going into another part of that message. So don't get stuck with those long words. Just try to make abbreviation. Abbreviation, I would say RT or RCT, and try to make myself get used to those abbreviated words so that later on you can take your time during the 45 seconds preparation time and try to summarize and come up with the solutions. Now, question number 5. I understand that there are different types of message. Yeah, the voicemail or a conversation. You see a different picture on the screen. When it's a voicemail, or you see a telephone, a very old ETS telephone there. I don't know who uses that kind of telephone nowadays, but they show a very old telephone, a very old one, and you would listen to a one-person message. And when you see those people sitting around the table, it seems like they're having a meeting. It's going to be a conversation between 2 or sometimes 3, but it's normally 2 people. Do I have to respond differently for each? And the answer is no. The response is the same. Because for a voicemail, you would leave a voice message, right? For a conversation, what they do is it's a meeting setting. And they're like, oh, you know what? We have to wrap up. We don't have time. So each of you think of an answer, a solution, and call me and leave me a message, okay? Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't have to make a different response for a different setting, okay? Both of them, what you have to do for both of them is you should leave a message, a voice message. So that's why we only have one template. No 2, no 3, just 1. Memorize that one template and use it for both situations. But I'm telling you this, when it's a voice message or voicemail they're leaving you, you would understand right away in the beginning part of the message that the person is who. Like they would say, oh, this is, the manager of human resources department, Linda Watson. Or they would say, oh, you know what? I'm the owner of this chicken restaurant. My name is Linda Watson. So they, start the message out by providing you who they are. But when you're listening to a conversation, they don't do that. You wouldn't know who the people are, the women, the men, who they are. So what you would have to assume is they're working together. They're dealing with some same situation here, the same, whatever problem they're dealing with. So they're people working together in an organization, a team or a company. So that's the 2 things that you have to remember, whether it's a voicemail or voice message, or whether it's a conversation, you would have to recognize who they are. So that's a tip that I give you. Now, question 6. Are there messages given in different English accent? Oh, are there messages given in different English accent, like American accent, British accent, Australian accent, right? The answer is no. No, not yet. Because for, let's say, TOEIC, listening comprehension, I know they use different kind of accents, and they try to trick you with those sound differences. But no, not in TOEIC speaking. They all use American accent, American English accent, and it's not that hard to listen to. But I would say, personally, I figure my students, they feel more comfortable listening and understanding female voice than the male's voice, because I guess the male's voice tone is a little lower, so they are having a hard time understanding. Or maybe my students are used to listening to me, female voice, so when they listen to male voice, they're like, okay, it's a little different than what I'm used to. So try to listen to different kinds of, voice messages, whether it's female or male. Try to listen to various kinds of sounds and try to get used to American accent, American English accent, okay? So those are some very frequently asked part 5 questions. And people are worried about part 5 because as it gets to the later parts, people are like, "Oh, I have to talk for 1 minute and now I have to listen and I lack in those abilities, so I don't know what to do." They worry too much. But don't get so nervous because my students, once they get, my tips, they figure part 5 isn't that hard to approach. There are certain situations they always like to give, and there are certain solutions that you always have to provide. So there are some set situations and solutions. So you have to, get that. I'll try to make a video on that too. And just practice listening and you're ready to go. Now, the last part of TOEIC speaking is called express an opinion. An opinion, right? Your opinion. You're going to talk for 1 minute. Now, first frequently asked question for this part is, has there been any changes to part 6? Yes. Yes, before it was only 15 seconds, which was, I would say, short for most test takers because, you guys, when you're looking at the question, it takes some time to understand. And when you're trying to prepare an answer, which has to be 1 minute long, 15 seconds wasn't enough time. But now they're generously giving you 30 seconds. 30 seconds, which is not too long, but still, it's twice as longer than before. So yeah, for the 30 seconds, what you do is the major change. One is the time difference. 2 is you can take notes, right? So it's your choice. Some people don't like to use that note taking because they're more like, they think it's faster to just like think. But if you can use your scratch paper and the pen they give you and try to outline what you want to what you want to say or what you want to mention in your answer. So those 2 things are the major changes. And frequently asked question 2, how can I fulfill 1 minute? It's too long. Okay, now by asking me this, it makes me feel that you haven't studied or practiced for TOEIC speaking much because most of my students feel that 1 minute is not enough. So when you have things to say for this part, you feel like, oh, it should be a little longer because I want to put this story into it, that story into it. I want to, use these expressions into my answer. But if you're saying it's too long, you're having a hard time fulfilling that 1 minute, it means that you haven't prepared much for this test. So what I do is I have about, about like 20 sets of stories ready for my students. I make them not memorize, but sort of read through it. And it's like a scenario they use to provide an example for each question. And when you have that story, a little simple story ready, you have more things to say. And there are some essential scenarios, essential stories that you have to have in order to take this test because there are some questions they like to talk about, some field of topics that they like to talk about. So yeah, that's what you need for this part. You need some stories, like chunk of stories that you can use for each and every question. So maybe I will make a video about that too soon. And frequently asked question number 3 is, do I have to provide an answer using my own experience? Okay. Now, traditionally, when you look at some tests like TOEFL or IELTS, a lot of teachers, they teach their students saying, if you're going to express your opinion, if you're going to provide an opinion, give them 2 reasons and 2 examples to support the opinion that you're saying. So I say just give them 1 reason and provide them with your own experience, example using your own experience. Because guys, all right, I am a member of this thing called Toastmasters. And this is an international organization where you can practice speaking English. And I've, been in the regional contest in Korea, and I, was the second runner up there. And by doing so, I realized when you're giving speeches, when you're talking, whether in English or Korean, it's really important that you know how to tell a story. Okay, it's really, really important to know how to tell a story because stories stick. Stories stick to somebody's head, somebody's idea, mind. So when you're telling a story, it's really persuasive. You can persuade somebody with your story. If it's your own experience, it's even better. But for most of the questions, it's really hard to have an experience of your own. So what I do for my students is I make up their own, like some example stories that they could use as if they were their own experience. So I tell them that you've been to this kind of job before, you have an experience of doing your own business, you have your experience of living in a small city, let's say town, and big city, and so on and so forth. So they can sort of like, use those stories and script it into their scenario and sort of like make a pretty story that could fit into the whatever question they're asked. So I would say, yeah, knowing how to say a story, a logical story that makes sense is very important. And that's what they're asking for. You use all these very hard English terms and you're using all that very complicated grammar and it doesn't make sense sometimes. Sometimes people don't make sense and they think that they're speaking English so well, using all those fancy words and fancy grammar. And the thing is, you have no point. Those people are so stuck to using those very hard words, very complicated grammar, but there's no point. And then 1 minute finishes, ends. So what you have to do is you have to provide a logical story to your answer. That's what I would say. And that's why I think logical stories are easier to tell if it's your own experience. And that's why I always tell that for part 6. So those are my answers for all the frequently asked questions on this channel. I see these questions here and there. There are some people asking the same question, different people, the same questions. So I've, summed them up and I'm just presenting these answers and my ideas of how to take this test better, in a better way. Okay, and in 2019, June was a very important point in TOEIC speaking because there have been some second major changes made. It's not the first time, it's the second time, but anyway, it has overall became friendlier. They have become more generous because they're giving you longer preparation time and you can take notes now. So they're trying to make you talk more English. Say more things in your answer. So they're being generous. Don't take it too hard, too seriously. Just relax when you're taking tests. And, if you practice, you'll do better. And I'll see you in the next video.